The old house stood silhouetted against a bruised twilight sky, a solitary figure on a windswept hill. Liam, a writer in search of quiet, saw not isolation but inspiration. He unlocked the heavy oak door, the groan echoing through the cavernous entryway. Dust motes danced in the fading light, painting the air with the scent of forgotten years. The real estate agent had called it character, a euphemism Liam understood meant neglect. He found his sanctuary in the study, a room paneled in dark wood, dominated by a towering floor-to-ceiling mirror. Its frame was a riot of carved cherubs and gargoyles, their faces obscured by a thick shroud of dust. Running a hand across the glass, Liam cleared a small circle, revealing a reflection that was dimmer, somehow older than the room it mirrored. He felt a faint, inexplicable chill, but dismissed it as a draft from the ancient window frames. This would be the place, he thought. Here his story would finally come to life. Days bled into weeks. Liam's routine became a simple loop: wake, write, sleep. He'd sit at the antique desk facing the mirror, the clatter of his keyboard the only sound breaking the oppressive silence. It was during one of these late-night sessions that he first noticed it, a subtle discrepancy. He glanced up from his screen, catching a flicker of movement in the glass. His coffee mug, sitting to his right on the desk, was reflected on the left side of the mirrored desk. He blinked, rubbing his eyes. Chalking it up to fatigue, he looked again. The mug was back in its proper place, but the unease lingered. The next day, a shadow in the corner of the room seemed to stretch and recoil in the reflection, independent of any light source. Books on the shelf behind him appeared rearranged in the glass, their spines swapping places when he wasn't looking directly. The house was no longer just quiet, it was watchful. The mirror wasn't just an object, it was an audience. The inconsistencies grew more brazen, more personal. One evening, as Liam reread a chapter, he saw his reflection in the mirror turn its head to look over its shoulder, even though Liam himself remained perfectly still. A cold dread, sharp and sudden, pierced through him. He slowly stood up, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs, and walked toward the mirror until he was inches from the glass. "Who are you?" he whispered, his breath fogging the surface. His reflection stared back, its expression identical to his own. For a long, terrifying moment, nothing happened. Then the corners of the reflection's mouth began to twitch. The subtle movement was horrifyingly deliberate. It pulled upwards, stretching into a slow, mocking smile that did not touch its eyes. It was his face, but the mirth was alien, a predatory grin that sent a tremor of pure fear through Liam's body. The reflection was no longer mimicking him, it was mocking him. Panic seized him. Liam stumbled back, his mind screaming, but his eyes were locked on the thing wearing his face. The reflection's smile widened into an impossible, grotesque rictus. Its features began to warp, the skin pulling taut over sharpening cheekbones, the eyes sinking into dark, hollow pits. It was a monster sculpted from his own likeness. The reflection raised its hand, pressing its palm flat against the inside of the mirror. The glass seemed to ripple at the point of contact. On Liam's side, a perfectly matching handprint began to form, not of condensation, but of a chilling black frost that spread like a disease across the cold surface. The lights in the study flickered violently, once, twice, before plunging the room into absolute darkness. A sharp cracking sound like ice breaking echoed in the black. The silence that followed was heavier, more profound than before. When the moonlight finally filtered back through the grimy windows, it illuminated an empty study. The desk was clear, the chair pushed in. The only evidence of the night's events was a faint, cold spot on the surface of the ornate mirror. The camera pushes slowly forward, moving past the desk, past the threshold of the frame and into the world behind the glass. Inside, a new figure stands trapped in the dim, reversed room. It is Liam, his face a mask of silent, screaming horror. He watches, powerless, as his own reflection, now whole and solid, turns from the mirror and confidently steps out into the real room, a subtle, triumphant smile playing on its lips as it closes the study door behind it.
Rain lashed against the attic window, each drop a tiny fist against the glass. Dust motes danced in the single beam of my flashlight, a silent, swirling cosmos in the forgotten space. It was up here, tucked away in a splintered wooden trunk beneath a pile of yellowed linens, that I found it. The music box was made of dark, almost black wood, intricately carved with unsettling, faceless figures that seemed to writhe in the dim light. Its silver crank was tarnished, and a strange coppery scent clung to it, like old blood and ozone. Curiosity, that foolish, fatal human trait, got the better of me. I took a deep breath, the air thick with the smell of decay and time, and turned the key. A hesitant, discordant melody tinkled out, each note a sliver of ice down my spine. It was a tune that felt profoundly wrong, a lullaby for the damned. Downstairs, the house, once a familiar sanctuary, began to feel alien. The melody from the box seemed to have seeped into the very walls, a phantom echo that played when no one was listening. It started with the small things, the kind of things you dismiss as tricks of a tired mind. A shadow in the corner of my eye, gone when I turned to look, the faintest whisper, like dry leaves skittering across pavement, just on the edge of hearing. Then the disturbances grew bolder. A book slid from its shelf with a loud thud, landing open on the floor. Cabinet doors in the kitchen would swing open on their own, revealing the dark emptiness within. The whispers became clearer, shaping themselves into a single sibilant word that I couldn't quite understand. A name spoken with venomous intent. The air grew heavy and cold, and the simple act of walking from one room to another felt like wading through unseen, malevolent waters. The haunting reached its terrifying crescendo. One moonless night, the house was plunged into an oppressive silence, broken only by the frantic thumping of my own heart. I saw it then, coalescing from the deepest shadows in the living room. A figure, tall and gaunt, made of shifting darkness and pure malice. It had no face, only a void where features should have been. But I felt its gaze on me, a physical weight of ancient hatred. Its form was indistinct, yet its presence was suffocating. I knew with a certainty that froze the marrow in my bones that this thing had been called by the music box. It was the listener the melody was meant for. With a guttural, inhuman scream that was part of the wind and part of my own mind, it lunged. I scrambled backward, my hands finding the heavy iron poker from the fireplace. My only thought was to destroy the source, the wooden prison that had unleashed this nightmare. With the shadowy entity clawing at the air just inches from my face, I swung the poker with all the strength my terror-fueled body could muster. The poker connected with the music box on the mantelpiece, and it exploded in a shower of dark splinters and twisted metal. For a blessed moment, there was silence. The suffocating presence vanished, the cold air warmed, and the shadowy figure dissolved into nothingness. I dropped the poker, its clang echoing in the sudden stillness, and sank to my knees, gasping for air, tears of relief streaming down my face. It was over. The house was mine again. But then, from the upstairs bedroom, a faint, familiar sound drifted down the hallway. It was the music box, its discordant, chilling melody beginning anew, as pristine and horrifying as the first time I'd heard it.
The bell echoed through the empty halls of Northwood High, its final toll a hollow promise of morning. Outside, the last of the students hurried away, their laughter and chatter fading into the twilight. But inside, a different kind of story was whispered, one that clung to the shadows of the long, silent corridors. It was the tale of locker number 13, a legend passed down through generations of students, each adding their own layer of fear. They said it was haunted by a student who vanished decades ago, his spirit forever bound to that small, metal space. He'll pull you in if you get too close after dark, Leo had warned earlier that day, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and excitement. They say you can hear him scratching, trying to get out. The group had shivered, a collective thrill running through them. Maya, however, had just rolled her eyes. Urban legends were for campfires and sleepovers, not the sterile, brightly lit hallways of a modern high school. To her, it was just a story, a silly distraction from exams and social pressures. Yet, as she stood alone in the descending gloom, the familiar school began to feel alien. Every flicker of the fluorescent lights, every distant groan of the building settling, seemed to amplify the silence. Determined to put the ridiculous ghost story to rest once and for all, she had concocted a plan. Armed with her phone's flashlight and a heavy dose of skepticism, she was going to prove that locker 13 was just a locker. She walked slowly, her footsteps, the only sound, the beam of her light, cutting a nervous path through the encroaching darkness. The school had never felt so vast, so empty. As she neared the infamous row of lockers, her heart began to beat a little faster, a traitorous rhythm against her ribs. There it was, number 13. It looked no different from the others, scratched, dented, and covered in peeling paint. Maya took a deep, steadying breath, her rational mind battling the primal fear that pricked at her skin. "Just a locker," she whispered, her voice sounding small and fragile in the immense quiet. She reached out, her fingers hesitating just inches from the cold metal handle. That's when she heard it. A faint, almost imperceptible creak. Her hand froze. The sound grew louder, a low, agonizing groan of rusted hinges. Before her wide, unbelieving eyes, the locker door began to swing open on its own. A chilling cold seeped out, carrying with it the smell of damp earth and decay. From the suffocating blackness within, a pale, translucent hand emerged, its fingers long and skeletal. It reached for her, not with speed, but with a terrifying, deliberate slowness, the ghostly form of a boy materializing behind it, his eyes empty, bottomless voids. A scream tore from Maya's throat, raw and unbridled. She stumbled backward, her skepticism vaporized by pure, undiluted terror. She didn't wait to see more. She turned and ran, her legs pumping with adrenaline-fueled panic. She didn't look back, didn't dare to. The sounds of her frantic footsteps and her own ragged gasps filled her ears as she burst through the main doors and into the cool, safe embrace of the night. She didn't stop running until the school was just a dark silhouette against the moonlit sky. Back in the silent, deserted hallway, all was still once more. The door to locker 13 hung slightly ajar, a faint, sickly green light pulsing gently from the darkness within, waiting patiently for the next curious soul.
I've always been drawn to the quiet solitude of the forest, to the places untouched by the hustle of modern life. It was on one of these hikes, miles from any marked trail, that I found something that didn't belong. Rising from a thicket of pines was a skeletal finger of rust and steel, an old radio tower abandoned and forgotten by time. The fence was a collapsed ruin, the gate groaning on a single hinge. A faded sign, barely legible, warned against trespassing. But curiosity, that old familiar pull, was stronger than any warning. The air grew heavy and still as I approached, the silence of the woods replaced by a low, almost imperceptible hum. The main building at the base of the tower was a concrete block, its windows shattered, its door hanging ajar, an invitation into the shadows. I felt a prickle of unease, a sense that I was crossing a threshold into a place I wasn't meant to be. But I pushed the door open and stepped inside anyway. The interior was a mess of decaying equipment and dust, yet a strange green glow emanated from a bank of consoles in the center of the room. Against all logic, the machinery was alive. Wires snaked across the floor and a single monitor flickered with an emerald sine wave, pulsing like a slow heartbeat. As I drew closer, a sound began to cut through the hum, a faint, crackling static from an old speaker. I leaned in, straining to hear, and through the white noise, a voice began to emerge. It was distorted, a garbled whisper that seemed to scratch at the edges of hearing. At first, it was just fragments, nonsense words lost in the electronic snow. But then, it sharpened, coalescing into something coherent, something chillingly familiar. It was a low, raspy voice, speaking with a strange, lilting cadence that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. The voice was describing something. It spoke of a man stepping through a doorway, his boots crunching on broken glass. My heart hammered against my ribs. It described him tracing a finger through the thick dust on a console, his breath catching in his throat. I froze, my hand hovering over the glowing screen. The voice was describing me. It narrated my every move, my every thought, my growing, suffocating panic. He sees the green light, it rasped from the speaker. He hears the voice in the static. He knows he's not alone. A guttural laugh echoed in the small room, and then with a sudden deafening pop, everything went dark. The green glow died, the hum ceased, and the speaker fell silent. For a moment, there was only absolute blackness and the sound of my own ragged breathing. And then I heard it, a sound from outside. The distinct, deliberate crunch of footsteps on gravel, slowly, methodically approaching the door. Every instinct screamed at me to run. I scrambled out a back window, tumbling into the overgrown brush, and sprinted into the dark woods without looking back. I didn't care about the branches that whipped at my face or the roots that threatened to trip me. All I could think about was getting away. As I crashed through the undergrowth, the voice returned. But this time it wasn't coming from the building. It was everywhere, booming from the tower itself, amplified across the silent forest, echoing through the trees around me. It was no longer a whisper, but a resonant, powerful declaration that chased me through the night. I've tried to forget that place, to dismiss it as a hallucination brought on by exhaustion and solitude, but the memory lingers, and the final words I heard that night still haunt my quietest moments. A promise that has followed me back to civilization. "Run all you want," the voice boomed, its laughter shaking the very air. "It doesn't matter, I'm always listening."